Squishies! Welcome back to another vlog. This is Into the Spider-Verse, commissioned vlog for Nick Borovic. Thanks for backing, Nick. So I want to start this off by saying that I'm recording this a couple of days after I watched the movie. Almost a week, actually. I'm sorry about that. It's just the way the timing worked out. There was no time to record the video immediately after I saw it, and then it was a few days before I had the time to do it. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully it won't affect my review at all because the movie made something of an impression. I think I remember it fairly well. First thing I want to talk about is there are too many Spider-Mans. This is what we all know. Like, it's everybody's complaint about Spider-Man. There are too many Spider-Mans. There's the Tobey Maguire one, there's the Andrew Garfield one, there's the MCU kid whose name I can't remember, there's all the different animated ones, and now there's Into the Spider-Verse. There are too many Spider-Mans. Which, of course, is the plot of the movie. There are too many Spider-Mans. Some of them's gotta go. And that's brilliant. It's brilliant, too, that they position Peter Parker as one of the ones who needs to go for our good and his own. The character is getting played out. If he stays around too long, he'll die. Peter Parker is a rather deeper character than the other ones as presented in the show. I'm not really that familiar with the other ones. I've never read Spider-Man Noir. I've never read whatever Penny Parker is from. I'm vaguely familiar with Spider-Ham as a thing that exists, but I don't think I've ever actually read that either. So, really, the only ones I know are Peter and Miles. And a little bit Spider-Man. And they've got to go because they're crowding out the movie. None of them will survive if they're all crammed into the movie. That's something Spider-Man 3 taught us, is it's very easy to cram too many characters into a Spider-Man movie and thereby ruin it. So, that's the first thing it does brilliantly. It's just that premise. There is a downside to that, though, which is I feel like the characters aren't very characterized. There's a lot of time spent on some really cool fight sequences that it's hard to get invested in because I don't know these characters. The only ones I really get a feel for are Miles and Peter only because I already know him. The truth is, other than Miles and a little bit Gwen, nobody in this movie really gets any characterization. Well, Doc Ock. I can't remember what her first name is. Liv? Yes, Olivia Octavius? That sounds right. She's awesome. I hope we get to see a lot more of her. Especially because Aunt May referred to her by first name, which is what her friends called her. And in the comics, like the original Amazing Spider-Man Peter Parker comics, Aunt May briefly dated Otto Octavius during a period when he'd apparently gone good. I don't remember if that was for real or not. It's probably been retconned 6 times since anyway. I choose to believe that that is true in the Spider-Verse world too. They totally dated, and that's awesome. The big thing, of course, is introducing Miles himself. Finally getting a Miles Morales movie. That's huge. Legacy characters don't get to be in the movies that often. The only real exception is Barry Allen, who is technically the second Flash, but he's by far the best known one. Most of the time, you only really see the first and best known version of a character. You don't see the inheritor of the suit or the spin-off version or anything like that in movies, except sometimes in animated stuff. But in Spider-Verse, we actually get Miles Morales, and it's great, and they really do good things with his story, because the thing is, something that has kind of been erased from the more recent Spider-Man movies is the degree to which Peter Parker is very readable as, like, the child of immigrants. Like, the neighborhood he lives in, everything about that in the 60s would have marked him as probably Jewish and probably the child of Eastern European immigrants, which at the time would have been enough to mark him with a degree of prejudice, not as much as a black person would face. And this is something that's been played with really well in comics that have taken that formula lately. The most obvious one being Ms. Marvel. Kamala Khan is basically what she is to the modern day, what Peter Parker would have been to, like, the 60s. But Miles Morales takes it in a little bit of a different direction. Because he's presented here as the kid on his way out. Both of his father figures have had to go kind of dark routes to create opportunity for themselves. They've both joined gangs. I mean, one gets issued a gun by the government for his gang membership, but they're both in gangs. And that's tough, but it's the kind of choice that coming, they downplay it, but the kind of background he comes from, that's the kind of choice people sometimes have to make. He's clearly from a rising working class African American and Hispanic background. By rising working class, I mean working class, but on actually managing to work their way up, which is pretty rare these days. So good on him for that. I wish we'd seen a little more of that. In particular, I wish we'd seen more of his mom. She's kind of a non-entity in the movie. We see enough of her to get the sense that, she's probably a nurse. I think those were nurse's scrubs she was wearing. I think blue means nurse, doesn't it? I forget. Nurse or a doctor, she was wearing scrubs. And her accent suggests that she is an immigrant, which, again, child of immigrants is a recurring thing. Usually never spelled out, but implied with Spider-Man. Excuse me. So they're playing with some interesting stuff there. The problem is, everything interesting they're playing with Miles Morales gets kind of drowned out by everything else that's going on. The profusion of other Spider-Men. So while that kind of core gag is great, it ultimately hurts the movie, which I think would have worked better as a straight Miles Morales movie. What I'm hoping is that because all signs of this did really well, it's apparently the #1 movie in China last weekend, that's enough. It's gonna have sequels, and hopefully those will be Miles Morales sequels, not 18 Spider-Man in a movie sequels. If we get Spider-Gwen in there too, that's awesome. She needs more character development, but the relationship between them was really cute. And visually, it was just stunning. Like, all my complaints are about characterization. Visually, it was gorgeous. It was doing things that I wish more animated movies did, especially if they're comic book adaptations. It was really playing with that comic book medium, with the visual sound effects, and the startle lines, and the shifts in color. It was really playing visually with a lot of different effects that were very comic booky, but then on top of that, the travel between universe stuff was much more visibly 3D and would like glitch in and out in a staticky sort of way that made it look alien by contrast. And that was a really cool effect. The shifts in art style for a couple of the Spider-Mans. Penny getting like that more manga-y, anime-y, Teen Titans-y style. I refer to it as kind of the Teen Titans-y style because it's a very American take on that visual style. The like black and white noir Spider-Man was great. Visually really great, and they got a couple of great gags out of his first encounters with color and playing with the Rubik's Cube. But mostly it just looked really good. And it was such a nice opposite to some of the stuff that has been coming out of like Disney. I have probably complained about this in a video before recently because I hate it, but I hate the new Lion King. I think it's a terrible idea. It's as near as I think they're filming it on live action backgrounds, but regardless, the characters are animated anyway. But by going realistic, what they really mean is that it's the Lion King, but less colorful, and the characters are less expressive. Yay. And this was like, let's go in the total opposite direction of that trend. Let's reject all of the brownness and photorealism and all that garbage, because frankly, photorealistic animation is kind of pointless if you're animating the whole movie. It makes sense if you're doing special effects in a live action movie, if you are going for having them fit in. If you want them to stand out, then you don't want them to be photorealistic. But if you want them to look integrated with live action film, then okay, use photorealistic animation. But if you're animating something as an animated movie, photorealistic just is gonna look boring. Because you're deliberately leaving out so many things you can do that you can't do with live action. You're making it less colorful, less vibrant. There's less opportunity for the squishing and the stretching as forms of expression. You know, you're deliberately limiting yourself to reality, and that's kind of losing the comic bookiness of it, which is a vital component of a superhero movie. So if you're going to animate it, you really ought to go all out, you know? It doesn't necessarily mean that I want everything to look like this movie. That's not what I want. I want everything to look different. I want things to look like what they are. I want filmmakers to think about what is the best look for the effects I'm going for on the audience. What is the best way to design the characters? What is the best art style to use for the emotional impact I'm trying to have, or the aesthetic that I'm trying to create. And too often, I feel like things are defaulting to tech demo instead of what's the aesthetic that we're trying for. And this movie, while I'm sure the technology behind it was brilliant, doesn't look like a tech demo. It looks like art. Comic booky art. But comic booky art is art. The comic bookiness really is what excuses a lot of the, like, the kind of characterization on some of the characters, the general kind of silliness of it. I mean, it's comic booky. You know, they opened the movie with the seal of the Comics Code, which is the Comics Code Authority, which is hilarious. Although I noticed the movie actually kind of did fit Comics Code requirements, which is interesting. I honestly don't know what the rules are for a movie using that symbol. I am pretty sure the symbol is trademarked, so a comic can't actually use it without permission from the Comics Code Authority, but I don't know if that's true for a movie, because trademarks generally only apply to one industry. That's an interesting thought. regardless, it was a great movie. I really recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. And I really hope we get more like this. And that's about it. Hope you all enjoyed this. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, essays, let's plays, and more. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye!